What would you do if the world told you that you were invisible, that you didn't matter, that your very presence was an insult to the people around you? Picture this: a grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in silk, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns that cost more than most people make in a month. The air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and self-satisfaction. And in the center of it all, a magnificent grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the faces of wealth and privilege. Now picture a man, worn jacket, weathered hands, 3 days without a real meal, standing at that piano, his fingers hovering over the keys. The room erupts in laughter, not polite chuckles, but the kind of cruel cutting laughter that's designed to remind someone of their place. The kind that says, "You don't belong here." But then he plays, and in an instant everything changes. The laughter dies. The mockery freezes on their lips. Because what comes from that piano isn't just music. It's a storm. It's heartbreak and hope and rage and beauty all woven together in notes so pure, so devastating, that grown men begin to cry. How did this happen? How did a man that these people had literally kicked out onto the street moments before become the only person in that room who mattered? Let me take you back. Back to where this story really begins. Back to a time when Elijah Brooks wasn't the invisible man in the corner. Back to when the world knew his name. 20 years ago, Elijah Brooks was everything that America loves to celebrate. He was the kind of success story that makes people believe in dreams. Born in Detroit to a single mother who worked 2 jobs, Elijah discovered the piano at age 7 in the basement of a community center. And from that first moment when his small fingers found those keys, something magical happened. He wasn't just good. He was extraordinary. By 15, he'd won every youth piano competition in the Midwest. By 18, he'd earned a full scholarship to Juilliard. The Juilliard, the school where legends are made, where the greatest musicians in the world cut their teeth. And Elijah wasn't just another student there. He was the student, the one the professors whispered about in the hallways, the one whose performances left audiences breathless. His specialty was the Russian composers, Rachmaninoff, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, pieces so technically demanding that most pianists spent their entire lives trying to master just one. Elijah mastered them all by the time he was 22. He didn't just play the notes. He lived inside them. He understood the pain and passion that drove those composers to create music that could break your heart and rebuild it in the same breath. His senior recital at Juilliard became the stuff of legend. He performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. If you know classical music, you know that piece. It's considered one of the most difficult compositions ever written. Rachmaninoff himself could barely play it. But Elijah didn't just play it. He owned it. Professors said it was the finest student performance they'd witnessed in 30 years. Record labels came calling. Concert halls wanted to book him. His future stretched out before him like a golden road, and all he had to do was walk it. But Elijah wasn't thinking about fame that night after his recital. He was thinking about the girl in the 3rd row, the one who'd been crying through the entire performance. Her name was Sarah. Sarah Martinez was a violinist. Talented in her own right, though she'd be the first to tell you she didn't have Elijah's gift. What she had was something else. A kindness, a warmth, a way of seeing people not for what they could become, but for who they already were. They talked for hours that night. About music, yes, but also about life. About what it meant to create something beautiful in a world that could be so harsh. About the responsibility that came with talent. About whether art could actually change anything, or if it was just a beautiful distraction from the inevitable pain of being human. Elijah had never met anyone who understood. But Sarah understood. They were married 2 years later in a small ceremony in Brooklyn. Just family and close friends. Sarah wore a simple white dress. Elijah played Debussy's Clair de Lune for their first dance. And when their daughter Maya was born 3 years after that, Elijah swore he heard music in her first cry. A perfect middle C that seemed to announce to the universe that something precious had arrived. Those were the golden years. Elijah's career was taking off. He wasn't stadiums and arenas famous, but in the classical music world, he was becoming a name. He recorded 2 albums, performed at Carnegie Hall, toured Europe for 6 months. The critics called him a once-in-a-generation talent and the natural heir to Vladimir Horowitz. But the best moments weren't on stage. They were at home. Teaching Maya chopsticks on the piano when she was 5. Making breakfast with Sarah while she hummed along to Brahms playing on the stereo. Reading bedtime stories and tucking in his daughter and thinking, how did I get so lucky? He remembered thinking that. Actually thinking those words. How did I get so lucky? As if luck was something that could run out. As if happiness was something the universe lets you keep. It happened on a Tuesday. Isn't that strange, how the worst moments of our lives can happen on the most ordinary days? Not on some dark and stormy night, not during some dramatic moment, just Tuesday. Sarah's parents lived upstate, about 3 hours away. They were getting older, and her father had been sick, so Sarah liked to visit when she could. That particular Tuesday, Maya had a school break, so Sarah decided to take her along for a few days, give her time with her grandparents, let Elijah focus on preparing for an upcoming concert. He was supposed to go with them, had planned to, actually, but then his agent called with an opportunity, a last-minute opening to perform at the Kennedy Center. Someone had canceled, and if Elijah could be ready in 2 weeks, the spot was his. It was the kind of opportunity you don't turn down, the kind that could define a career. So he kissed Sarah goodbye, hugged Maya tight, and told her to be good for her grandparents, watched them pull out of the driveway in their blue Honda Civic. Sarah waved. Maya pressed her face against the window, making silly faces at him. That was the last time he saw them alive. The accident happened on Route 87. A truck driver later investigation would show had been awake for 20 hours straight, trying to make a delivery deadline, trying to earn a little extra money. Fell asleep at the wheel for just a few seconds. Just a few seconds. That's all it takes. The truck crossed the median. Sarah didn't have time to react. The impact killed her instantly. Maya survived the initial crash. She was rushed to the hospital. The doctors did everything they could. She died 3 hours later. She was 8 years old. Elijah was practicing Rachmaninoff when he got the call. He remembers that. He was in the middle of the second movement of the Piano Concerto No. 2. His hands were moving across the keys, completely absorbed in the music, when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but something made him stop. Something made him pick up. The police officer's voice was professional, trained to deliver the worst news a person can receive. But even professional training can't hide the sorrow in a voice telling a man that his entire world has ended. Elijah doesn't remember much after that. He remembers dropping the phone. He remembers a sound coming out of him that he didn't recognize, a sound that wasn't quite human. He remembers his hands, his precious, talented hands, slamming down on the piano keys in a discordant crash that seemed to mock everything beautiful he'd ever played. The funeral was 4 days later. Closed caskets. Elijah stood between them, flanked by wood and brass, and felt like he'd been buried alive. People came, said things. He didn't hear any of it. Sarah's parents were there, broken and hollow-eyed. His own mother, who'd sacrificed everything to give him his chance at music, stood beside him and wept. But Elijah didn't cry, couldn't cry. It was like something inside him had frozen solid, like his heart had turned to stone to protect itself from completely shattering. After the funeral, people expected him to grieve, to take time, then to slowly, painfully rebuild his life. That's what people do, right? They endure. They survive. They find a way forward because the alternative is unthinkable. But Elijah couldn't find that way forward. He tried to play piano 2 weeks after the funeral. Thought maybe the music could save him like it always had before. He sat at his Steinway, put his hands on the keys, and felt nothing. No worse than nothing. He felt like those keys were burning his fingers. Like every note he might play would be a betrayal of the silence that Sarah and Maya now lived in. He tried anyway. Forced himself to play. Got 3 measures into a Chopin nocturne before something inside him broke. He stood up so violently that the piano bench fell backward. And then he did something he'd never done before. Something that would have been unthinkable to him just a month earlier. He slammed the piano lid down. Hard. So hard the sound echoed through his apartment like a gunshot. And in doing that, in slamming that lid down with all his rage and grief, he caught his right hand. His precious, talented, irreplaceable right hand. 3 fingers. Crushed. The doctors fixed them. Surgery. Physical therapy. Technically, they healed, but the damage was done. The fine motor control necessary for professional piano performance was compromised. He could still play after a fashion, but not like before. Not with the precision and power that had made him special. But here's the truth. The physical injury wasn't what ended Elijah's career. It was the injury underneath. The one that had nothing to do with bones and tendons. Because even if his hand had healed perfectly, Elijah wouldn't have gone back to the piano. Couldn't have. Every piece of music he knew was connected to them. Sarah humming along in the kitchen. Maya's little face lighting up when he'd play her favorite songs. The lullabies he'd composed for her when she was a baby. It was all poisoned now. All of it. The concert at the Kennedy Center was canceled. His agent, sympathetic at first, eventually stopped calling. His recording contract expired and wasn't renewed. Bills started piling up. The insurance money from the accident covered the funeral and the medical costs, but not much else. And Elijah, lost in a fog of grief and trauma, didn't fight any of it. Friends reached out, tried to help. His mother begged him to come stay with her. Sarah's parents, drowning in their own grief, still called every week. But Elijah pushed them all away. Stopped answering calls. Stopped answering the door. Until eventually they stopped knocking. He couldn't stay in the apartment. Every room screamed with memories. Maya's bedroom still full of her toys. The kitchen where Sarah used to sing. The piano sitting like a tombstone in the living room. So he left. Just walked away one day. Left almost everything behind. Took some clothes, his wallet, started walking. He told himself it would just be for a little while. Just until he could breathe again. Just until the world stopped feeling like it was crushing him. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of sleeping in shelters when there was space, under bridges when there wasn't. 3 years of watching how quickly a person becomes invisible when they don't have an address, when their clothes get worn and dirty, when they haven't had a shower in a week. 3 years of learning that the same city that had once celebrated him, that had applauded his talent and called him brilliant, would now look right through him like he wasn't there. If you've never been homeless, you probably have ideas about what it's like. Most people do. They see someone sleeping on a park bench or holding a cardboard sign, and they think they understand. They think it's about not having a house. And yes, that's part of it. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the invisibility. Elijah learned this quickly. Learned that when you don't have a home, you stop being a person to most people. You become a problem, a statistic, something to step around on the sidewalk, something to ignore. He'd stand on corners sometimes watching the streams of people pass. People in business suits hurrying to meetings, college students with expensive backpacks heading to class, couples holding hands laughing about something. And not one of them would meet his eyes. Not one. It wasn't malicious, exactly. It was worse than that. It was indifference. He was simply part of the landscape now, like a street sign or a fire hydrant, present, but not worthy of acknowledgement. There were exceptions, of course. Some people would drop $1 in his cup without looking. A few would nod. Even fewer would say hello. And those small moments of recognition were like water in the desert. Brief, precious, never enough. Elijah had routines. You had to have routines to survive. He knew which shelters served meals on which days, knew which coffee shops would let you use the bathroom if you caught them during the morning rush when they were too busy to pay attention, knew which library branches had security guards who'd let you sit and rest, and which ones would chase you out the moment you walked in. He avoided other homeless people, mostly, not out of judgment, but because forming attachments, forming any kind of relationship felt impossible. He was still too raw, still too broken. Most days it took everything he had just to keep existing. There wasn't anything left over for other people. But he couldn't avoid the music. It was everywhere, leaking out of car windows, drifting from apartment buildings, buskers on street corners with their guitar cases open. And every time he heard it, especially classical music, it was like someone was dragging a knife through his chest. He'd developed a specific route through the city that avoided most of the concert halls and music venues, went blocks out of his way to not walk past the conservatory where students practiced. Because hearing those scales, those exercises, those attempts at pieces he used to perform was unbearable. But 6 months ago, something changed. He'd been looking for a new shelter. The one he usually stayed at was full, and someone had told him about a place on the east side that sometimes had space, St. Augustine's Community Center, run by a local church. Nothing fancy, but they had beds and served breakfast. He got there late. All the beds were taken. But the woman at the desk, Mrs. Patterson, told him he could sleep in the common room if he wanted. It wasn't much, just a couch and some chairs, but it was warm and it was safe. Elijah said thank you, started to settle in. And then he saw it. In the corner of the room, covered with a sheet, was a piano. His first instinct was to leave, to walk right back out into the cold rather than spend the night in a room with that instrument. But he was so tired, bone tired, soul tired, and it was freezing outside. So he stayed. He tried not to look at it, lay down on the couch and turned his face to the wall. But he could feel it there, could sense its presence like a physical weight. He didn't sleep much that night, and around 3 in the morning when the shelter was quiet and still, he got up. walked over to the piano, lifted the sheet. It was old, probably 40 years or more. The wood was scratched, some of the keys were yellowed, but it was tuned. Someone cared enough to keep it tuned. His hands moved without his permission, placed themselves on the keys. The position was automatic. Muscle memory from 10,000 hours of practice. And before he could stop himself, he played a chord. Just one. G major. Simple. Basic. It sounded like coming home. And that's when Elijah started to cry. For the first time since the funeral. For the first time in 3 years. He sat on that piano bench in an empty room in a homeless shelter at 3 in the morning and cried. For Sarah. For Maya. For the life he'd lost. For the man he used to be. For all of it. When the tears finally stopped, he played. Softly, so as not to wake anyone. He played the lullaby he'd written for Maya. The one she used to request every night before bed. He played the Debussy he'd danced to at his wedding. He played pieces he didn't even realize he remembered. His right hand wasn't what it used to be. The damaged fingers couldn't quite achieve the speed and precision they once had. But it didn't matter, because for the first time in 3 years, Elijah wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was just playing. He started coming back to St. Augustine's regularly after that. Not every night, but often. And always late at night when everyone else was asleep, he'd play. Mrs. Patterson knew. She'd hear him sometimes stop outside the door and listen, but she never interrupted, never said anything. Until one Tuesday morning, Elijah was eating breakfast in the center's small cafeteria. Powdered eggs and toast. Not great, but it was food. Mrs. Patterson sat down across from him. She was in her 60s, African-American with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to be easily shocked. "I heard you playing last night," she said. Elijah stiffened. Thought maybe he was about to be told to stop. But Mrs. Patterson smiled. "You're very talented. Where did you learn to play like that?" He could have lied. Could have said he'd taken some lessons as a kid. But there was something about her face. Something that made him feel like honesty was safe. "I went to Juilliard," he said quietly. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows went up. Juilliard. The music school in New York. He nodded. What happened? Such a simple question, such a complicated answer, but Elijah found himself telling her. Not everything, but enough. About Sarah and Maya, about the accident, about not being able to play anymore, about ending up here. Mrs. Patterson listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I'm so sorry," she said. And he could tell she meant it. They sat in silence for a while. Then Mrs. Patterson spoke again. "There's a charity event next week, at the Ashford Hall. It's this fancy restaurant uptown. They're raising money for homeless outreach programs. Ironic, right? Rich people eating expensive food to feel good about helping people like us." Elijah didn't say anything. Didn't see where this was going. Anyway, Mrs. Patterson continued. "They always have music at these things. This year it's some young guy, Dylan Ashford, the owner's son. Apparently he plays piano. I've heard him before. He's fine, technically proficient. But there's no soul to it, you know. It's like listening to a very expensive machine." She paused, looked at Elijah carefully. "I'm going to be there. I volunteer with the organization that's benefiting from the event. And I was thinking, maybe you'd want to come." Not inside, obviously. They're not exactly welcoming to people without tuxedos, but maybe just nearby. You could hear the music through the windows. It's supposed to be a beautiful space. Elijah's first instinct was to say no. The thought of being near that kind of event, that kind of world he used to be part of, was painful. But something in Mrs. Patterson's eyes made him reconsider. Why he asked. She smiled. Because I think you need to remember that you're still a musician, that you still have that gift. And because maybe, just maybe, hearing someone else play will remind you that music isn't your enemy. It's your friend. Elijah didn't commit, but he didn't say no either. The event was scheduled for Friday night, and as the week went on, Elijah found himself thinking about it more and more, found himself curious. What would it be like to hear classical music performed live again, even from outside, even from a distance? Friday came, cold and clear. Elijah spent the day the way he spent most days, walking, trying to stay warm, avoiding trouble. As evening approached, he found himself heading east, toward the address Mrs. Patterson had mentioned, the Ashford Hall. He told himself he was just curious, that he'd walk by, maybe listen for a minute, then leave. He had no idea that this decision would change everything. The Ashford Hall was everything Elijah expected it to be. 3 stories of red brick and white columns, architectural dignity from an era when buildings were designed to impress, the kind of place where power and money gathered to congratulate itself on its own refinement. It had been in the Ashford family for 3 generations. Started as a private residence converted to a restaurant in the 1980s, when Victoria Ashford inherited it and decided that opening it to the public, or at least to the right kind of public, would be more profitable than simply living in it. Victoria Ashford. Even if you didn't know her, you'd recognize the type. Old money trying desperately to pretend it's still relevant. She was 53, but looked younger thanks to excellent dermatologists and a team of personal trainers. Always dressed impeccably. Hair always perfect. Smile always precise and controlled. She ran the Ashford Hall the way a general runs an army. Every detail mattered. Every plate that went out had to be perfect. Every table setting had to meet her exacting standards. Every member of the staff knew that one mistake could mean termination. But it wasn't really about the restaurant. It was about control, about creating a space where she decided who belonged and who didn't, where she could enforce her particular vision of how the world should be. Refined, elegant, and most importantly, exclusive. She'd married once in her 20s to a man from another wealthy family. It lasted 5 years before he left her for someone warmer, someone less concerned with appearances. The divorce was bitter and expensive. She got the restaurant. He got his freedom. Victoria considered herself the winner. They'd had 1 child, Dylan, who was now 25 and the center of his mother's universe in the way that only children of controlling parents can be. Dylan Ashford was handsome in an unremarkable way. Good bone structure inherited from his mother, expensively maintained teeth, hair always styled just so. He dressed well, spoke well, had gone to the right schools. On paper, he was everything a young man of his social class should be. But there was something missing, something essential, a hollowness at the core that no amount of privilege could fill. He'd been taking piano lessons since he was 6. Not because he wanted to, but because Victoria had decided that accomplished children reflected well on their parents. She'd hired the best teachers, paid for the finest instruments, made sure Dylan practiced 2 hours every day without fail. And Dylan had learned. He'd become technically proficient, could play most of the standard repertoire with acceptable accuracy. But he'd never loved it, never felt that spark that true musicians feel. To him, the piano was just another expectation to meet, another box to check on the list of things that made him acceptable in his mother's eyes. He'd tried to quit several times, once at 12, again at 16, and once more at 20, when he'd gone away to college and thought maybe finally he could be free of it. But Victoria always pulled him back, with guilt, with pressure, with the subtle threat that her approval, and with it her support, depended on him being the son she needed him to be. So he still played, still performed at events like tonight's charity gala, still sat at the piano and went through the motions while inside a part of him screamed to be anywhere else, doing anything else. He was setting up now in the main dining room of the Ashford Hall. The grand piano had been positioned in the center of the space, tables arranged around it in a semicircle. The lighting was perfect, the flowers were perfect, everything was perfect. Victoria stood nearby supervising, always supervising. Remember, she said to Dylan, this is an important night. Senator Mitchell will be here. The Vanderbilts, the Hartfords. These are people who matter, people whose opinion matters. Dylan nodded. He'd heard this speech 100 times. Play the Chopin Nocturne first. It's crowd-pleasing without being too showy. Then the Debussy. Save the list for the end. Give them something to talk about. I know, Mother. And smile. You always forget to smile. People want to see that you're enjoying yourself. Dylan didn't point out that he wasn't enjoying himself, that he never enjoyed himself at these things. That would only lead to an argument, and arguments with Victoria never ended well. The restaurant manager, Gerald Whitmore, approached. He was 42, had worked at the Ashford Hall for 15 years, and had learned long ago that the key to keeping his job was anticipating Victoria's needs before she had to voice them. Mrs. Ashford, the guests will begin arriving in 30 minutes. The kitchen is ready. The staff is briefed. Everything is on schedule. Victoria nodded approvingly. Good. And Gerald reminded everyone at the door. This is a private event, guest list only. I don't want anyone wandering in off the street. Of course, Mrs. Ashford. She turned back to Dylan. Adjusted his tie, even though it was already perfect. This is your night to shine. Don't waste it. Then she walked away, heels clicking on the marble floor, leaving Dylan alone at the piano. He sat down, played a few scales to warm up. The notes were technically correct, perfectly executed, but they were empty, like everything else in this gilded cage. Outside, through the large windows, the city was going about its business. People hurrying home from work, street vendors packing up for the night. And somewhere in that crowd, making his way slowly through the cold, was a man who had once played these same pieces with a passion that could make angels weep. Two worlds, about to collide. By 7 o'clock, the Ashford Hall was transformed. The already impressive space had been elevated to something almost magical. Candles flickered on every table. The crystal chandeliers had been dimmed to create an atmosphere of intimate elegance. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the space, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The guests arrived in town cars and private vehicles, women in evening gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent, men in tuxedos and designer watches. They handed their coats to attendants and were guided to their tables, their conversations a murmur of stock portfolios and vacation homes, and whose children had gotten into which Ivy League schools. This was Victoria's element. She moved through the crowd like a queen among her subjects, greeting everyone by name, making sure each person felt acknowledged and important. because that's what events like this were really about. Not the charity, though that was a convenient justification, but the gathering of the tribe, the reinforcement of social bonds among people who controlled the city's money and power. Outside, Elijah arrived just as the sun was setting. He'd walked for over an hour to get here, his thin jacket doing little against the November cold. He stood across the street from the Ashford Hall, watching the parade of privilege, and felt something twist in his chest. He'd been part of that world once, not quite at this level of wealth, but adjacent to it. He'd performed at events like this, had worn tuxedos and made polite conversation with donors and patrons, had been welcomed into spaces that were now closed to him. The distance between then and now felt insurmountable. Mrs. Patterson had mentioned she'd be inside volunteering with the organization that was benefiting from the fundraiser. She'd told him to come by around 7:30, that she'd try to come out and bring him some food if she could. It was kind of her, more kindness than most people showed. But Elijah hadn't come for food. He'd come for the music. Or at least that's what he told himself. He found a spot near one of the large windows, not directly in front where he'd be obvious, but close enough that when the performance started, he'd be able to hear. The window was partially open, presumably to help with ventilation, as the room filled with people. Cold air leaked out. Warm air leaked in. Inside, Victoria was making her welcoming remarks, thanking everyone for coming, talking about the importance of supporting homeless outreach programs. The irony wasn't lost on Elijah. Here were people who'd spent more on their outfits tonight than most homeless people would see in a year, gathering to congratulate themselves on their compassion. But he tried not to be bitter about it, tried to remember what Mrs. Patterson had said. That some good did come from events like these. That the money raised, however it was raised, did help real people. That cynicism was easy, but change required working within the systems that existed, however flawed they were. The speech ended, polite applause. Then Victoria introduced Dylan, called him her talented son, said how proud she was, how fortunate they all were to hear him play tonight. Dylan stood, walked to the piano, sat down with the careful posture of someone who'd been trained since childhood, positioned his hands, and began. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Op. 9, Num 2. Even from outside, even through glass and distance, Elijah could hear it clearly. And he knew within the first 4 measures exactly what kind of player Dylan was. Technically competent, every note in the right place at the right time. The dynamics were correct, the tempo was appropriate, but it was mechanical, soulless, like listening to a very sophisticated computer program approximating human emotion without actually feeling anything. The people inside didn't seem to notice. They were clapping at the appropriate moments, smiling, nodding appreciatively. But Elijah wondered if they were really listening, or if they were just going through the expected motions. Probably the latter. He stood there in the cold, listening to this passionless performance, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not anger exactly, not even frustration, but a kind of sadness. Because music this beautiful deserved better. It deserved to be played by someone who understood what Chopin was trying to say, who could convey the longing and melancholy and fleeting hope that were woven into every phrase. Dylan finished. The applause was enthusiastic but not ecstatic. Polite appreciation for a job adequately done. Elijah should have left then, should have walked away and counted himself lucky that he'd gotten to hear any piano performance at all, even a mediocre one. But something kept him there. Some instinct he couldn't name. He didn't notice the kitchen door opening. Didn't notice Gerald, the restaurant manager, stepping out to throw away some trash. Didn't notice until the man was standing right next to him. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Elijah turned, started to say something, But Gerald had already taken in his appearance. The worn jacket, the unkempt hair, the unmistakable look of someone who lived on the streets. "This is a private event. You need to move along." "I'm not causing any trouble," Elijah said quietly. "I'm just listening. I don't care what you're doing. You can't be here. Go on, get out of here." Gerald's voice was rising. Inside, Dylan had started his second piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune, the same piece Elijah had danced to at his wedding, the same piece that used to reduce Sarah to happy tears. "Please," Elijah said. "I just want to hear the music." But Gerald was already calling inside. "Security. We have a situation out here." Elijah held up his hands. "I'm leaving." "It's fine. I'm leaving." But as he turned to go, something inside him rebelled. He was so tired of being invisible, so tired of being moved along, so tired of apologizing for existing. And maybe it was the music. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was 3 years of accumulated humiliation finally reaching a breaking point. He walked toward the front door of the restaurant. Gerald shouted after him, "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Elijah didn't answer. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth hit him first, then the light, then the smell of expensive food and perfume, and then the stares. Every head in the room turned. The conversations stopped. Dylan's playing faltered for just a moment before continuing. But everyone was looking at Elijah now, this out-of-place figure standing in the doorway, this intrusion of reality into their carefully constructed evening. Victoria Ashford's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition of what Elijah was, and then anger. "Who are you?" she demanded, standing from her table. "How did you get in here? I just wanted to hear the music," Elijah said. His voice sounded small in the large room. "I used to play. I wanted to hear it." Laughter. Cruel and cutting. Someone at a back table started it, and it spread like a virus. Laughter at the absurdity of this homeless man claiming to be a musician. Laughter at his audacity in thinking he belonged here. Gerald Victoria said coldly, "Remove this man, now!" Gerald grabbed Elijah's arm, but Elijah pulled away. Not violently, but firmly. "I'm hungry," he said. It wasn't what he'd meant to say, but standing there surrounded by tables full of food, the reality of his situation hit him. "I haven't eaten today. Could you spare some food?" "Anything. I'll leave after." We don't serve your kind here," Victoria said. Each word was sharp and deliberate, designed to cut. This is a place for respectable people, not vagrants, not beggars. Gerald, if he won't leave, voluntarily call the police. More laughter. Whispers. Someone took out their phone, probably to record this entertainment. And Elijah felt something inside him crack. All the dignity he'd been trying to hold on to, all the pride that had kept him going. It splintered and fell away, leaving him feeling naked and ashamed. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I'm sorry, I'll go." Gerald grabbed his arm again, harder this time, and steered him toward the door, pushed him outside into the cold. The door slammed shut behind him, and Elijah stood there on the sidewalk shaking. Not from the cold, but from the humiliation, from the laughter still echoing in his ears. Inside, he could hear the music starting again, Dylan resuming his performance, life going on as if Elijah had never existed. He should have left then, should have walked away, and never looked back. But he couldn't move, couldn't make his legs work. So he stood there just outside the door and listened as Dylan played the final piece. Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. It was technically impressive. Lots of fast runs and dramatic flourishes, the kind of piece designed to make a pianist look good. And Dylan played it adequately, hit all the notes, executed all the difficult passages. But it was hollow. Show without substance, fireworks without heat. And listening to this talented but passionless playing while standing outside in the cold, after being thrown out like trash, something awakened in Elijah. It wasn't anger. It was something clearer than that. Something that felt almost like purpose. Because he suddenly understood what Mrs. Patterson had been trying to tell him. Music wasn't his enemy. Grief had made him believe that. Trauma had convinced him that every note he played would hurt him. But standing here listening to this empty performance, he realized that what hurt wasn't the music itself. What hurt was the silence, the absence, the waste of a gift that could bring beauty into the world. Inside, Dylan finished. The applause was loud and sustained. Victoria was beaming. People were standing. It was a triumph, at least by the standards of people who didn't know what real mastery sounded like. And Elijah made a decision. He opened the door and walked back inside. The applause was still echoing through the dining room when Elijah stepped back inside. For a moment, no one noticed him. They were too busy congratulating Dylan, who was standing at the piano accepting handshakes and compliments, with the practiced modesty of someone who'd been trained since childhood to perform gratitude even when he didn't feel it. Victoria was radiant. This was her triumph as much as Dylan's. Maybe more. Because in her mind, a successful performance by her son was validation of her parenting, her taste, her entire worldview. She moved through the crowd, accepting praise with carefully calibrated humility. He's worked so hard. We're very proud. But then someone gasped. A woman near the entrance, and suddenly all eyes were on Elijah again. The room fell silent, that kind of profound silence that speaks louder than any noise. The kind that happens when something so unexpected, so outside the bounds of normal social interaction occurs that people's brains take a moment to process it. "You've got to be kidding me," Gerald said, striding toward Elijah. "I told you to leave. I threw you out. What part of that don't you understand?" But Elijah wasn't looking at Gerald. He was looking at the piano, at that beautiful Steinway Grand sitting in the center of the room. He could see from here that it was perfectly maintained, perfectly tuned, everything a piano should be. "I want to play," he said. The silence somehow deepened. Then someone laughed. Then several people. Then the whole room was laughing again. But this time Elijah didn't flinch. "Did you hear that someone said loud enough to be heard? The homeless guy thinks he can play piano. This is beyond inappropriate," Victoria said, her voice shaking with rage. "This is trespassing. This is..." "Gerald, call the police right now." "Let me play," Elijah said again, louder this time. "Just one piece, then I'll leave. I promise." "Are you insane?" Victoria moved toward him, her face contorted with disgust. "You come into my establishment, you make a scene, and now you think you have the right to touch that instrument? That piano is worth more than you'll see in your entire miserable life." More laughter. Cruel and merciless. Someone was definitely recording now. Multiple phones out. This would be on social media within the hour. Crazy homeless man crashes charity event. The story would be about Elijah's audacity, his delusion, not about what happened next. "You don't understand," Elijah said. His voice was steady now. Clearer. "I know how to play. I went to Juilliard. I was a concert pianist. Before everything fell apart." This only made them laugh harder. Because of course he'd say something like that. Of course, this delusional vagrant would claim to have attended one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. The story was writing itself. The jokes were practically pre-made. Dylan was watching from near the piano. His face was unreadable. Not mocking like the others, but not sympathetic either. Just observing. Gerald grabbed Elijah's arm for the third time that night. "That's it. I'm calling the cops. You're going to jail for this." "Wait." The voice came from the back of the room, strong and clear. Everyone turned. Mrs. Patterson stood up from her table. She'd been sitting with other volunteers from the outreach organization watching this entire scene unfold with growing distress. And she'd finally had enough. "Let him play," she said. Victoria turned on her. "Excuse me, who are you to tell me what happens in my restaurant?" "My name is Dorothy Patterson. I volunteer with the Homeless Outreach Program that is supposedly the beneficiary of tonight's event. And I know this man. His name is Elijah Brooks, and he's telling the truth." The laughter started to die down, confusion replacing amusement. "He did attend Juilliard," Mrs. Patterson continued, walking toward the center of the room. "He was a professional concert pianist, one of the best of his generation. He suffered an unimaginable tragedy that destroyed his life. And yes, he's homeless now. Yes, he's struggling. But that doesn't mean he's lying about who he was, who he still is." Victoria's face was a mask of fury, but underneath it, Elijah could see something else. Uncertainty. Because Mrs. Patterson spoke with such conviction that doubt was beginning to creep in. "This is absurd," Victoria said, but her voice had lost some of its force. "You expect me to believe that this person is some sort of musical prodigy? I expect you to have enough compassion and curiosity to give him 5 minutes," Mrs. Patterson said. "What's the worst that could happen? If he can't play, you'll have a good story to tell at your next dinner party. But if he can..." She let the sentence hang. The room was silent again. All eyes were on Victoria now. She was trapped, and she knew it. If she refused, she'd look cruel, heartless, at an event ostensibly about helping the homeless. But if she agreed, and this man made a fool of himself, she'd look gullible. She made the calculation quickly. The risk-benefit analysis of a woman who'd spent her life managing optics. "Fine," she said coldly. 5 minutes. 1 song. Then he leaves, and we never speak of this again. And if he damages that piano in any way, I'm pressing charges." She turned to Elijah, her eyes hard. "This is your chance to prove you're not completely delusional. Don't waste it." Elijah nodded. He was shaking now, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From the realization that he was about to do something he hadn't done in 3 years. Something he'd thought he'd never do again. He walked toward the piano. The crowd parted for him, some people moving their chairs back as if his poverty might be contagious. He could smell the expensive perfumes and colognes, could see the glitter of jewelry in the candlelight, could feel the weight of their judgment and skepticism. He reached the piano, put his hand on its smooth surface. The wood was warm from Dylan's playing. Beautiful. Perfect. He sat down on the bench. It felt strange. Foreign. Like returning to a childhood home after decades away. Everything was familiar, but nothing felt quite right. He positioned his hands over the keys. His right hand, the damaged one, twinged slightly. But he ignored it, focused on the weight of the keys, the spacing, the feel. And then before he could second-guess himself, before fear or doubt or grief could stop him, he played. The first chord of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor rang out through the dining room like a proclamation, like thunder, like the voice of God announcing that something was about to change. It's a piece that begins with power. 3 massive chords that seem to shake the foundations of whatever space they're played in. Most pianists approach them carefully, respectfully, trying to balance power with control. Elijah played them like he was trying to break something, like he was channeling 3 years of pain and rage and grief into those opening notes. His hands came down with such force that the piano seemed to shudder. The sound filled every corner of the room, overwhelming conversation, overwhelming thought. And the laughter died, instantly, completely. Because everyone in that room, whether they knew music or not, whether they cared about classical piano or not, could hear that something was different. Something was real. The opening chords resolved into the main theme, that haunting, descending melody that sounds like something crying out from the depths, like a soul in torment seeking redemption. Rachmaninoff wrote it when he was 19, supposedly after seeing a painting of the Last Judgment. And when it's played right, you can hear that apocalyptic vision in every note. Elijah played it right. His damaged right hand didn't matter. The technique he'd lost didn't matter. Because what was pouring out of that piano now wasn't technical perfection. It was something more fundamental, more necessary. It was truth. Every person who'd ever loved and lost someone heard their grief in those notes. Every person who'd ever been broken and tried to rebuild themselves heard their struggle. Every person who'd ever felt invisible, worthless, cast aside, heard their silent scream given voice. Elijah's eyes were closed. He wasn't seeing the dining room or the judgmental faces or the phones still recording. He was somewhere else. He was in his apartment with Sarah and Maya. He was at Juilliard feeling like the world was full of possibility. He was at the funeral standing between 2 caskets. He was sleeping under a bridge wondering if he'd ever feel human again. All of it poured into the music. The joy and the despair, the love and the loss, the beauty and the horror of being alive and aware and so terribly, terribly fragile. The technical difficulties of the piece, the rapid runs and wide leaps and complex rhythms, he navigated them all. Not perfectly. His right hand faltered in a few places where it would never have 3 years ago. But the imperfections somehow made it more powerful, more human. This wasn't a machine executing a program. This was a man tearing open his chest and showing everyone his bleeding heart. Victoria Ashford had stopped moving, stopped even breathing, it seemed. She stood frozen, her face reflecting something that might have been awe, or might have been horror, or might have been the sudden terrifying recognition that she had been catastrophically wrong about something fundamental. Dylan sat in his chair, watching Elijah's hands on the keys, and felt something die inside him. Or maybe something was born, because he understood finally what the difference was. What separated going through the motions from actually making music. He'd spent 20 years playing piano, and had never once done what this homeless man was doing right now. Gerald, who'd been so ready to throw Elijah out to call the police to treat him like garbage, stood with tears streaming down his face without even realizing he was crying. Mrs. Patterson gripped the edge of her table, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer of thanks. And the wealthy guests who'd come here tonight to network and be seen and congratulate themselves on their charity sat in stunned silence as this man they'd laughed, at this man they'd mocked and scorned, revealed to them what greatness actually looked like. The piece built toward its climax. That massive ascending section where the pianist's hands seemed to climb toward heaven before plunging back down into the depths. Rachmaninoff marked it fortissimo, as loud as possible. Elijah played it like he was trying to wake the dead. And maybe he was. Maybe he was trying to wake Sarah and Maya, trying to tell them that he was still here, still fighting, still carrying them with him. Or maybe he was trying to wake himself. The part of him that had been dead for 3 years. The part that had given up on ever feeling anything again. The music filled the room like a storm, like an ocean, like something vast and terrible and beautiful that could sweep you away if you weren't careful. Several people were openly weeping now. Not polite tears, but great wrenching sobs. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and can't be controlled. And then after what felt like an eternity and an instant all at once, Elijah reached the final section. The resolution. The piece doesn't end happily. Rachmaninoff didn't believe in easy answers. But it ends with a kind of acceptance, a recognition that suffering is part of existence, but so is beauty. That we carry our pain, but we keep living anyway. The final chords, lower than the opening ones, quieter but no less powerful, like someone whispering a truth too profound for shouting. And then silence. Elijah lifted his hands from the keys, opened his eyes, blinked as if waking from a dream. For a moment he'd forgotten where he was, had forgotten the dining room and the wealthy patrons and the reason he'd played at all. He'd been lost in the music, completely and utterly lost. And it had saved him. The silence stretched. 3 seconds. 5. 10. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath, afraid that any sound might shatter the spell of what they'd just witnessed. Then someone stood up. A woman in the back, tears on her face. She began to clap. Slowly at first, then faster. Then everyone stood, every single person in that room. Even Victoria, though she looked like it was killing her. Even Gerald. Even Dylan. They stood and they applauded. Not politely, not perfunctorily, but with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for life-changing moments, for revelations, for the times when something breaks through the mundane routine of existence and reminds you that beauty and power and truth still exist in the world. The applause was thunderous. It went on and on. People were shouting. Some were still crying. One man near the front called out, "Bravo, bravo," in a voice choked with emotion. And Elijah sat at the piano, stunned. He hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected anything, really. He'd just needed to play. Needed to prove to himself that he still could. That some part of him was still alive. But looking at these faces now, at the tears and the genuine emotion, he realized something. He hadn't just played for himself. He'd played for them, too. Had given them something they didn't even know they needed. A moment of genuine feeling in lives that were probably more hollow than they wanted to admit. The applause continued, showed no signs of stopping. And slowly, carefully, Elijah stood up from the piano bench. The standing ovation lasted for almost 2 minutes. In that time, everything in the room changed. The hierarchy that had seemed so fixed, so unquestionable just an hour before, had been completely upended. The man they'd thrown out, laughed at, treated as less than human, was now the center of attention, the most important person in the space. When the applause finally began to die down, people rushed forward, not to remove Elijah this time, but to speak with him, to shake his hand, to thank him for the performance. An older man with white hair and an expensive suit reached him first. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been going to concerts for 40 years and I've never heard anything like that. Where have you been playing? What's your next performance?" Elijah didn't know how to answer, didn't know how to explain that this was his first performance in 3 years, that there was no next performance, that he didn't even know where he'd be sleeping tonight. But before he could speak, Mrs. Patterson was there, moving through the crowd to stand beside him. Her presence was protective, anchoring. "Elijah hasn't been performing," she said gently. "He's been away from music for a while. Tonight was his first time back. First time another woman dripping in diamonds looked astonished. But that kind of artistry, you can't just pick that up after years away." "Where did you train?" "Juilliard," Elijah said quietly. And this time no one laughed. "Juilliard," someone repeated. "Of course, that makes sense, but why haven't I heard of you? What's your full name?" "Elijah Brooks." The name didn't register with most of them. He'd never been famous enough for mainstream recognition. But one person, a man in his 60s, froze. "Elijah Brooks, the Rachmaninoff specialist. I saw you perform at Carnegie Hall. Must have been 15, 16 years ago. You were magnificent. I've told people about that concert for years. What happened to you?" And there it was, the question hanging in the air. What happened to you? How did someone with that much talent end up here in this condition? Elijah opened his mouth, but found he couldn't speak. The story was too big, too painful, and he'd already given so much of himself tonight. Mrs. Patterson squeezed his arm gently. Elijah experienced a terrible tragedy. He lost his wife and daughter in a car accident. The grief, it took everything from him, including his music. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the silence of judgment or skepticism. It was the silence of sudden understanding, of people realizing that the person they'd mocked, had laughed at, had wanted to throw out, was someone who'd suffered more than most of them could imagine. Victoria Ashford stood apart from the crowd, her face unreadable. But she was listening, and slowly, as if it took tremendous effort, she walked forward. The crowd parted for her. Everyone watched to see what she would do. This was her restaurant, her event, her territory. She had every right to still be angry, to still demand that Elijah leave. She stopped in front of him, looked at him directly for the first time. Really looked, instead of seeing just a category, just a problem to be removed. "I owe you an apology," she said. Her voice was stiff, the words clearly difficult for her to say. "I judged you without knowing anything about you. I treated you with cruelty and disrespect. That was wrong. I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It was stilted and clearly uncomfortable for her, but it was genuine. And in a woman like Victoria Ashford, who'd probably spent her entire life believing she was always right, admitting fault at all was significant. "I'm sorry too," said another voice. Dylan had approached his face, showing something Elijah hadn't seen before. Humility. "I've been playing piano my whole life, and I didn't understand what it was supposed to be, what it could be. Watching you tonight, hearing you, I finally understand the difference. Thank you for showing me that." There was pain in Dylan's voice. The pain of someone who'd just realized they'd wasted years of their life going through motions without ever touching meaning. But there was also something like relief. Like maybe being released from the pressure to be something he wasn't could be a gift. "You didn't waste anything," Elijah said gently. "Technique matters. Training matters. You have a foundation. But you have to find the reason to play, the thing that makes it necessary. For me, it's always been about trying to make sense of being human. The joy of it, the terror of it, all of it." A woman stepped forward. She was younger, maybe in her 30s, professionally dressed. "I'm Rebecca Martinez. I run a community music program for underprivileged kids. We're always looking for teachers, for mentors. Would you be interested? The pay isn't much, but we could offer you something. A place to start rebuilding. And housing. another man added quickly. He was the older gentleman who'd recognized Elijah's name. I own several properties in the city. I have a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. It's been empty for 2 months. You could stay there. No rent for the first 6 months. Give you time to get back on your feet. There's a piano, the man continued. Nothing like this Steinway, but it's decent. Tuned regularly. You could practice. You could teach. You could rebuild. The offers kept coming. A music store owner offered to provide instruments. A woman who ran a recording studio said she'd give him free studio time if he ever wanted to record. A therapist offered pro bono counseling. On and on. All these strangers moved by his playing, wanting to help. It was overwhelming. Too much. Elijah felt his legs go weak, and Mrs. Patterson steadied him. One thing at a time, she said softly. You don't have to decide everything tonight. But Elijah was looking at something else. Someone else. In the corner of the room, partially hidden by the crowd, he saw a photograph on the wall. A family photo. Victoria much younger with a man and a small boy. The husband who'd left. Dylan as a child. And suddenly Elijah understood. Understood why Victoria was the way she was. Why she needed so much control. Why she judged so harshly. She was protecting herself. Building walls because walls were safer than vulnerability. Safer than letting people see that she hurt too. Mrs. Ashford, he said, and she turned to him, surprised to be addressed directly. Thank you for letting me play. I know it wasn't your first choice, but thank you. She nodded stiffly. Then, in a voice so quiet that only Elijah and Mrs. Patterson could hear, she said, My husband left because I couldn't be warm enough, couldn't be vulnerable. And I've spent 20 years proving that I didn't need that warmth. That control and perfection were enough. But listening to you tonight, I wondered if maybe I've been wrong. It was the most honest thing she'd probably said in years, and Elijah nodded, acknowledging the courage it took. We're all just trying to survive our pain, he said. We all build different walls. The event was winding down. People were beginning to leave, but not before stopping to thank Elijah again, to slip business cards into his hand, to make sure he knew that help was available if he wanted it. Dylan approached one more time before leaving. Would you give me lessons? He asked. Real lessons. Not just technique, but how to find the music underneath. How to make it mean something. Elijah smiled. I'd like that. As the dining room slowly emptied, Elijah found himself alone with Mrs. Patterson. They stood by the piano, both of them drained but peaceful. I didn't think I could ever play again, Elijah said. I thought the music was gone. That grief had killed it. Grief doesn't kill music, Mrs. Patterson said. It just changes it, makes it deeper, more true. What you played tonight that wasn't despite your pain. It was because of it. You took something terrible and made it into something beautiful. That's not weakness. That's strength. Elijah touched the piano one more time, felt the smooth keys under his fingers, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt something like hope. Not the naive hope of his youth, not the belief that everything would be perfect, but the harder, more durable hope of someone who'd been broken and was choosing deliberately and consciously to rebuild. Not because the rebuilding would be easy or complete, but because the alternative was to let the tragedy win. To let Sarah and Maya's deaths be the end of his story. And they deserved better than that. He deserved better than that. Let's go, Mrs. Patterson said. I'll walk you back to the shelter. Tomorrow we can start figuring out what comes next. But tonight you just rest. You did something extraordinary tonight. You reminded all of us what being human means. They walked out into the November night. The cold bit at Elijah's skin, but he didn't mind it as much as before, because inside him something had thawed. Something he thought was frozen forever had started slowly to warm. Behind them, the lights of the Ashford Hall glowed warm and golden, and in front of them the city stretched out in all its messy, complicated, beautiful chaos. Elijah was still homeless, still broken in many ways, still grieving. The performance hadn't magically fixed his life, but it had done something more important. It had reminded him that he was still here, still capable of creating beauty, still worthy of dignity and respect. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. There's a lesson in this story that goes beyond Elijah, beyond one man's fall and tentative redemption. It's about how easily we dismiss people, how quickly we decide who matters and who doesn't based on superficial categories: wealth, status, appearance. We walk past people every day who have gifts we can't imagine, who have stories that would break our hearts if we bothered to listen, who have survived tragedies that would have destroyed us, and we don't see them. We don't see them because we've decided, consciously or not, that they don't matter, that they're invisible. But everyone has a story. Everyone has a song inside them, whether they can play piano or not. Everyone has something that makes them irreplaceable, unique, valuable. The people in the Ashford Hall that night learned this lesson in the most dramatic way possible. But we don't need drama to teach us. We just need to look, really look. At the person asking for change on the street corner, at the janitor cleaning our office building, at the delivery driver bringing our packages, at anyone we've trained ourselves not to see. Because here's the truth. Dignity isn't earned by achievements or wealth or status. It's inherent. It's the birthright of being human. And when we deny someone their dignity, when we treat them as less than human, we don't just hurt them, we diminish ourselves. Elijah played Rachmaninoff that night and it changed lives. But the real miracle wasn't in the music, extraordinary as it was. The real miracle was in the choice to stand up after being knocked down. The choice to try again after giving up seemed easier. The choice to believe that he still had something to offer the world, even when the world had made it clear it didn't want him. We all face those choices in smaller ways. Every day. When something knocks us down. When we feel invisible or worthless or broken beyond repair. We choose whether to stay down or stand up. Whether to let bitterness win or find some way, however small, to keep creating beauty. Elijah chose to stand up, chose to walk back into that room even after being thrown out, chose to sit at that piano even knowing he might fail, even knowing that his damaged hand might betray him, even knowing that he'd probably be mocked. He chose courage over safety, vulnerability over protection, truth over comfort. And that's what made the music so powerful. Not the technical skill, though, that was there, but the courage, the willingness to tear open his chest and show everyone his wounds and his healing all at once. That's what great art does. That's what being human requires. The willingness to be seen, fully seen. With all our scars and flaws and broken places, and the faith that somehow we're enough anyway. Elijah Brooks was enough. He was always enough. The tragedy didn't change that. The homelessness didn't change that. The judgment of strangers didn't change that. He was a human being with inherent worth and dignity and a gift that the world needed. Just like you. just like everyone. So the next time you see someone who society has decided doesn't matter, remember Elijah. Remember that you don't know their story, don't know what gifts they carry, don't know what battles they've survived. Treat them with the dignity they deserve, not because they've earned it, but because they're human. Because if our positions were reversed, if you were the one sleeping in a shelter or under a bridge, you'd want someone to see you, really see you, to recognize that you're still there, still worthy, still capable of creating something beautiful. Music has the power to change us, but so does kindness, so does recognition, so does the simple act of treating someone like they matter. That night at the Ashford Hall, Elijah gave everyone a gift. He showed them what their cruelty had almost destroyed, what their judgment had almost silenced. And in doing so, he gave them the chance to choose differently, to be better. Some of them will take that chance, some won't. But Elijah did his part. He showed up. He played. He reminded everyone in that room what being truly alive sounds like. And maybe that's all we can do. Show up. Share our gifts, whatever they are. Treat each other with dignity and respect. And trust that sometimes that's enough to change the world, or at least to change one person's world, one moment at a time. Elijah Brooks played piano that night. But more than that, he lived. Fully and bravely and beautifully. Despite everything. Because of everything. And that's a lesson worth remembering.